let's get started. It's 5 minutes after, so we're running a little bit behind here, but that's okay. That gives us more people to be here. If some of you were just listening to Steve Munisteri and I chat, I am in Dallas right now. Steve was here last night and drove back to Austin so he could be on the call. But I'm here. We're attending the RNC, the Republican National Committee spring training here in Dallas, and they came to Dallas because we're open, and that we were allowed to walk through the hotel without masks. We were allowed to meet with a lot of people all in one room. I mean, we did social distancing and we were respectful, but it was filled with a lot of information, which I'll be sharing here in the near future. But today we want to stay focused on election integrity. I know there's been a lot going on at the Capitol. There's stuff going on in the national level, which I will tell you now and at the end that we do have one of the RNC election integrity director coming on next week to tell us what's been going on, what the plan is, how they plan on helping to maintain election integrity, not just in Texas, but across the nation, which is important for us all to hear so that we know what we're fighting for, that we know we're not the only ones doing it, that it is happening everywhere else with a little bit of a different spin, maybe a different state. So, but anyway, so I just want to welcome you all and thank you for being here. Oh, let me just say one other thing. I want you to know, as Steve just mentioned, people here, all of our friends across the nation are so impressed that we have so many people get up at 7 o'clock in the morning so they can be a part of this call to action call, and that how we get together and how we are making a difference. So let's go right into our agenda. What I'd like to do, I don't think Senator Hughes has gotten on, so we'll pull him in.
He's on.
He's
on.
Oh,
I'm here.
He's here. Oh, there you are. Well, wonderful. Well, Senator, I'm glad to have you on. Thank you. And could you give us a brief update of what's going on in the Senate? I know there's a couple questions being asked, but we're going to wait until after our presentation to answer them. But give us a briefing what's been going on, especially on election integrity, of course, is what we're focused on.
I'd be glad to. Thank you for having me, and thanks for, my goodness, doing all that you're doing. Exciting times. We all know about the challenges that we're facing, but it's encouraging to see Republicans, conservatives come together and fight the national media, fight the establishment, fight everyone we have to fight to get this done. So it is happening. I want to tell you about a couple of bills that I know that really matter. Senator Creighton, a great conservative Republican we all appreciate, we passed an important bill. An important bill of his in the State Affairs Committee that I'm honored to chair this week, and that is a bill that establishes the Election Fraud Division in the Attorney General's office.
Uh-oh, did we lose you?
Our Attorney General, Ken Paxton, of course, has been aggressively going after folks who are cheating, and this bill will give him more tools to do that. It was a hard fight. Many people on the other side don't want us to be investigating election fraud, but we're going to keep doing it. Senator Creighton also had an important bill along these lines that has to do with those mail ballots. We know from testimony before the Senate and the House committees over the last couple of sessions that one of the number one ways people cheat, these vote harvesters, they go to people's homes, they mislead people, they get them to sign documents, not telling them what they are. One of the biggest ways is to request a mail ballot based on a disability, even though you're not disabled. There's also been concern about whether the people requesting the ballots are actually voters. And so I know everyone on this call remembers the fight for voter ID. Texas led the nation in voter ID. We passed a strong voter ID bill about 10 years ago. And you'll recall at the time, the opposition said, if you do voter ID, if you make people show an ID to vote, It's going to depress turnout. It's going to suppress the vote. It's evil. It's just wrong. Of course, we knew better. We knew it made sense to do it. And when we passed voter ID, our voter turnout increased, because when people know that elections are fair and secure and their vote's going to count, they'll show up, they'll participate. So now for mail ballots, Senator Creighton's bill that we strongly support says that when you file your application for a mail ballot, you have to write on there on the application your driver license number or your state ID number. If you don't have either one of those, the last 4 digits of your social security number. And then, of course, you know how it works. You send your application for a mail ballot, then the ballot comes to you and you fill it out in an envelope, send it back. On the envelope, you also write your driver license number or state ID number or last 4 of social. So that way we can match those up and make sure the person requesting the ballot is the one who voted the ballot. Simple security measures for mail ballots. A big fight, but that is through the State Affairs Committee and on its way. Also, Senator Paul Bettencourt, a strong conservative from Houston. Many of you know Senator Bettencourt, a leader for a long time. You may have heard how in Houston we have sworn evidence of a particular post office box. It's a commercial post office box at a UPS store, and there are several hundred voters who live there. And of course, as you know, post office boxes are about 6 inches wide and about 6 inches tall and about a foot deep. There's no way you can live in a post office box. And the law says you cannot claim that as your residence, because your residence is where you physically reside. But of course, if you wanted to cheat, if you wanted to bring a bunch of people in and sway an election or just claim that people lived in a certain district, you put them all in a post office box. That's what they've been doing in Houston. And so the Senate Bill 1111 says, no, you can't live in a post office box. You have to have a physical address if you're going to vote in a district. Again, common sense measures, but big fights. Also, how many of us have had experience where there's a problem at the polling place, maybe on election day or during early voting? Maybe the election judge is not letting the poll watchers in, or maybe the election judge is not letting someone vote who's entitled to vote, or the law is not being followed. Many times that happens, and the police are called, and many times they're not trained in election law, and oftentimes they just go with whatever the election judge says. It doesn't matter what the law is, and they're not always sure who they can trust. Senate Bill 1589 establishes election marshals. So we'll have DPS troopers, and as you know, our Texas Highway Patrol, our Texas State Police, the DPS is an elite, well-trained police force. We'll now, if we can get this bill all the way through the process, we'll have election marshals. So we'll have DPS troopers who are specially trained in election law. So when something happens at a polling place, when the law is not being followed, when there's a dispute, we can call one of these election marshals. They'll come, they'll resolve it, and that way, even on election day, even during early voting, when the law is not being followed, we can fix it right then. Also, these election marshals will be empowered to investigate election fraud. And when they bring a claim to a district attorney, the district attorney must investigate. One of the problems we have is that our big city urban district attorneys, who are now mostly elected from the other party, so many of them refuse to investigate legitimate claims of election fraud. So these bills are all, we were proud to move all these bills through the State Affairs Committee. They're on their way to the Senate floor. We'll be sending them over to the House. Of course, as you know, we've already passed Senate Bill 7, a comprehensive election integrity bill. The bill makes it easier to vote and harder to cheat. That's the idea. And the national media hates Senate Bill 7. I've had the pleasure of going on CNN a couple of times. I don't do much television. You know, I look better on the radio, but I've done a few national TV interviews, and I know now why our friends like to go on Fox News and not on CNN. Man, those folks on CNN, well, they're pretty aggressive. But we went on CNN because we realized that we want to reach people who are not conservatives, not just Republicans, and these corporate types and maybe people who are new to Texas, or maybe suburban voters who are swing voters. All they're hearing from the national media and from the Democrats is how this election reform is really suppression, and it's against people, and it's to make it harder to vote. And so we thought it was important to go on there and tell the truth. And so we've done that a couple of times and had a couple more opportunities. We're going to keep doing that. Pray for us if you think about it, that we can explain this bill clearly, because these bills are just common sense reforms. They apply to everyone, Republican, Democrat, regardless of your race, where you live. These are common sense reforms. And we know that when elections are fair, everybody wins. And we also know that Texas is a conservative center-right state. We know that Republicans work hard. And if the rules are fair for everyone, we're going to do great. So on election integrity in particular, that's what's going on in the Senate. Senate Bill 7 I'm honored to be the author of that bill. We've also passed legislation on ballot harvesting to make that a crime and to make it easier to go after those folks. These are the people who are influencing voters, overcoming their will, intimidating them, getting them to sign documents they don't know what they say. We're going after those folks also in central counting. On election day, once the ballots are counted at the polling places, they're all brought to central counting. Now in all of our medium to large counties, we'll have that live stream. So you'll be able to watch the process in central county. And whenever the early vote is going on in election day, that whole process, central county will be live streamed 24 hours. We all saw some of those videos from other states of ballots being brought in the dead of night after the election, after the poll watchers have gone home. We want to make sure that's not happening in Texas. So we're glad to be working with the House. Representative Briscoe Kane, a wonderful state rep who chairs the elections committee. Of course, Representative Jatan, who I know was on the call, been on more calls than I've been on, who's fought for election integrity before being elected to the House, working on that. Obviously, Stephanie Click, expert in these matters, who's fought these things for a long time. And Representative Mike Schofield, back in the House now, who, after taking a term off, very smart guy, election law expert. We're working with all the Republicans in the House to make sure we get these bills to the governor's desk. So we have plenty of time left in the session. As you know, we're part-time. We meet only every other year, and this session is going to run through May, and then we'll be done. And so in the next couple of weeks, we're getting to the intense part where everything has to come together. But right now, the election integrity bills are moving in the House, in the Senate, also moving in the House. I'm sure our House members, friends will tell you about that. But we're in good shape. But we're not done yet, but we're in very good shape, and we're very optimistic. This could be the strongest election integrity session we've had. So we're very encouraged.
Well, Senator, that is awesome. Thank you for the details. And you know what? I challenge our listeners to go to the TLO, look at the bill, like Dion Starnes had taught us how to dissect it. But I guess you would recommend too that you would want our group to their action item here is to go to their senator in support of these bills that you have just talked about, if they believe that's what they would like to see happen.
Well, you're so right. And I know our friends, our honorable state representatives who are on the call will say the same thing, because as you know, the Senate bills go over to the House. The House bills the House bills come over to the Senate. So yes, ma'am, all the way through the process. Senate Bill 7 is out of the Senate now, and then House Bill 6 is the House's big omnibus elections bill. One of them that's going to be moving. So yes, ma'am. If we can, all the Republicans are for these bills. So, but it helps. It helps when we hear from folks back home.
Yeah,
certainly from our Republican women who are so engaged and who we listen to.
Thank you. Well, Senator, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you and coming on and giving us this briefing. Very incredible. So now what we're going to do, and I hope you'll stay on because there'll probably be questions maybe towards the end. But I'd like to go on. I see that Representative JC, you're on here. I don't know if you got any sleep last night, but can you give us a briefing of what's going on on the House side?
Yeah, good morning. It is good to see everybody on this. I think I see 153 people participating right now. So that's awesome. We did have budget day yesterday. Didn't last as late or early into the morning as sometimes does, but we were done, I think, by about 11 o'clock last night. So it was all right. So glad to be with everyone here this morning. We did do elections committee on Wednesday. We couldn't do it yesterday because of budget day. And on Wednesday, we did, Chairman King was pretty aggressive about making sure that we passed out more election bills and getting them over to the calendars committee so we can get on the floor as soon as possible. And so I think we did 3 different iterations of votes, and I laid out 3 bills on Wednesday, and we passed out all 3 of them. We passed out bills dealing with, where polling locations can be. Our polling equipment should be in, it shouldn't be in tents. They should be in something that's secure enough to maintain the integrity of those machines and make sure they're not tampered with. We dealt with alternate judges, making sure alternate judges have some say in who the clerks are. So we have a fair number of, election workers that are from both sides of the party. And then we worked on poll watchers, and that was something that Senator Hughes talked a lot about. But it is important that we make sure that poll watchers have the ability to make sure that there's the election code is all being enforced correctly in the polling locations. And then we also dealt with, I had another bill dealing with pre-filling ballot by mail applications. We had some issues where some ballots were being sent out with disabled pre-selected on there. And, you had a number of people that felt like, well, I got this application in the mail. It's pre-filled out. It says I'm eligible. And so there must be some credibility to that. And that's an error. And so we're going to work on fixing that as well. And so there are a number of bills moving through the House committee, and they're going to make it to the floor. As Senator Hughes correctly said, we have time still. We finished the budget now, and now we move on to some of this more contentious stuff. Like I said, the Republicans are all on board with making sure that we address this session, but it's still going to be a battle. And so we'll hear these on the floor, and HB 6 and SB 7 both get their time, and I think we're gonna be successful with this. Speaker Phelan's all on board. We got the support of Chairman Burrows and the Calendars Committee, I believe, and of course Chairman Kane has been really spearheading this, and so we're moving.
Well, thank you so much for all that hard work. You guys are just unbelievable, and again, call on us, because our team, the people on this call are ready to go to action. So if you need help by making calls, please do not hesitate to contact us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to brag on Dion Starnes a little bit. She's been very well connected with our office and working hard on this across the state. So we appreciate all the support she's putting into it, and what everybody's doing coming down for the committee hearings and making those phone calls and shooting those emails over when we need them to get these bills through the committees. So thank y'all for all you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, well, Dion and Tanya Robertson they were my backup in case you guys at the House were spending the night there because of budget. So we're glad you're here, but we're glad that we had them because they are right on top of it. So I think that was a great shout out. So thank you so much. Representative Click or Chairman Click, are you on the call? I'm not sure if you're on a phone. She might not. I think she had another meeting she might have had to go on. So if she comes on, we'll go to her later. But before we give it to Shirley, we have just 1 minute here. So I'm going to do, Karen, do you want to read or give us your statement real quick? Because I know that you would like to do that.
Oh, sure. A little off topic. I just wanted everybody on here to know that when we're here on Friday mornings, I may not have realized it to this degree, but we are in the presence of some exceptional principled Republicans. For example, Chairman Click, Chairman Kane, and Representative Chiton, I think I can safely speak for the rest of the Republicans on this meeting when I say thank you. Because thank you for being the rare members who are the stand-up minority in the Texas House who conscientiously voted in favor of the enduring Texas Republican principle of school choice yesterday. There were only 29 people who did, and all the rest were among the 115 representatives who voted yesterday with the Democrats. to defund any possible form of school choice proposed. So I'm really proud to have ever had conversations with them here on the Friday mornings. And I'm super disappointed with the ones yesterday who voted in opposition. And yet these legislators like Representative Chaton were among the few standout, just 29 who, with their principled, brave votes, gave reason for myself and others to keep the faith. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, they are pretty special. They really are, as our senator is too. Okay, Shirley Martinez is going to introduce our guest speaker, and we want to give him this attention. So Shirley, thank you for taking the time to reach out to Loyd, and could you please introduce him? You're muted, Shirley, you're muted. Let me get you.
Okay.
There you go. Uh-oh. You're muted again. There
Okay.
you go.
Let me know. Today we welcome Dr. Loyd Potter, the state demographer for Texas since 2010. He is the director of the Institute for Demographic and Socioeconomic Research. He can talk about population estimates and projections for Texas, and he is the expert in demographic and socioeconomic research. And because he does all this, it follows that he is a walking Texas data archive. Dr. Potter holds a PhD in demography and sociology from UT Austin, a Master of Public Health from Emory, Master of Science in Education from the University of Houston, and a Bachelor of Science from Texas A&M. Today, he provides us with a fundamental understanding of our demographics and its impact on redistricting in 2021, which eventually becomes all about representation, about federal dollars, and about our businesses and communities. Welcome, Dr. Potter.
Thank you, Shirley. So I'll share my screen here shortly, but certainly I want to thank you for inviting me, and certainly Senator Hughes. I've kind of been following him for some time. And certainly he continued. I kind of was pretty much aware of him as a representative, and certainly as a senator, he's kind of like continued to have a very significant and positive influence, and all the other representatives and senators on the call. But all of you that aren't actually in elected office, because you're the ones that actually, I think, kind of make things happen. Even though you have your representatives and senators that are there kind of moving things forward, but you're the ones that are really communicating what's important. And I think certainly what I'm hearing is the things you're communicating, they're hearing, and they're actually taking action. So I really appreciate, it feels very positive to see democracy in action here. So I'm going to share my screen. I'll try to move through this pretty quickly so there have a little time to for questions and discussion. So I'll start off just by the census. As you probably know, occurred last year. We had some real challenges with the census because of the pandemic. The Census Bureau field offices were shut down for a couple of months. And this kind of hit right as the census was rolling out. I mean, so they were really starting to collect data at the beginning of March. And then all of a sudden, March 14th came along and things kind of came to a sudden slowdown. Nonetheless, the Census Bureau is a pretty impressive organization, very logistically competent, and they rolled with the punches, and I think did a pretty good job rolling out the census and collecting data. And now they're kind of going through this process, which I'll talk about here in a second. But the census is important because it determines how many US congressional seats each state gets. Population is changing and shifting across the country over time. And so every 10 years, we conduct a census to see how it shifted and then ensure that US representation shifts along with the population. It's then also, the data are also used for redrawing congressional districts, and so that's what we'll be talking a fair amount about today. So US congressional districts, but also state legislative boundaries, state school board, and then it goes all the way down to county commissioners to local school boards, kind of, essentially the data from the decennial census is used for essentially rebalancing our representation across the state and actually across the country. And then the other thing that the census is it's essentially a statistical foundation for the rest of the decade. And it's also used for distribution of federal tax dollars. So we send our tax dollars to Washington. We want to get as many of those back as possible. And one of the key elements of this are those formula funded programs that are dependent on population. So we want to make sure as many Texans as are residing here are counted as possible, because that will influence how many federal dollars we get back for programs. So redistricting, the apportionment file was supposed to have been delivered by December 31st to 2020. The Census Bureau was not able to meet that deadline. They now are saying they will deliver it by April 30th, 2021. And so that's coming up pretty soon here. So in the next week, we're looking to see that file released. That's just a total count of the population. There's no detail, no demographic detail in that. And then the redistricting file, which is the important file for purposes of actually drawing the boundaries within the state. And that file has a lot of detail in it. It is now not going to be delivered until sometime around the end of September. Historically, it's been released on a flow basis, and because our legislature is in session, historically, when the census is completed, Texas was always at the first, one of the first states to get the redistricting file, so that our representatives and senators could jump in and do redistricting while they're in session, and draw the maps, get them voted on, and then essentially kind of determine what the districts are for the upcoming elections. That now, again, we're likely to see a special session called to do redistricting, because the House and Senate will be out of session when these data are released. And then it has all this demographic detail in it, and the data are available to the public. When they release it, it's available to everyone. When we look at Texas and look at population change over the decade, the Census Bureau did release 2020 population estimates. So this is not the census count, it's an estimate of the population. And they estimated Texas population in July 1st, 2020 to be 29,360,759. If that's close to what the census count is, that will mean that Texas grew more than any other state. We added more than 4,215,000 Texans. And we're going faster than all but Utah. So we grew at a rate of 16.8%. Utah is a much smaller state than Texas, but it's growing pretty quickly. If all this holds true, and the population change that we're expecting to see in other states holds true, Texas is likely to get 3 new US congressional seats. And so that's part of the redistricting process. We currently have, I think, 36 seats, and we'll get 3 more, so we'll be at 39 seats. So that means we'd have to redistrict anyway, because the population shifted around the state. But now we have to find room for 3 new US congressional seats, assuming that plays out once the apportionment file is released. So when we look at Texas and look at population change, here's showing the light blue column are Census Bureau estimates, and the dark blue column are the Texas Demographic Center population projections. Our projection was a little higher than the Census Bureau's estimate, so we're at 29,677,000. Their estimate was, as I said, 29,360,000. The actual census will probably be somewhere in between those, probably closer to the Census Bureau estimate would be my guess. And so what happens is you take the number of seats that you have, and you take that number. So we have 31 Texas Senate seats, and divide that into the total population, and that tells you the size of each district. And so the challenge then for our senators and representatives is to draw boundaries around population that meet that kind of get within plus or minus 5% of that number. And so that number is kind of an important one, and that will be determined when the apportionment file is released. We'll be able to go through and see, well, every district needs to be about this size. And so if you think about that, then areas that have grown in population, the populations become more dense, it might be a district that now has too many people in it, and they have to make that district geographically smaller to bring it down to this number. And then if there's an area that's lost population, they'll have to make the district geographically larger to bring additional population in to get up to that number. So that's essentially the essence of the exercise of redistricting. I also want to point out here that the district sizes are going to be larger this year in Texas than they were after 2010, simply because we've been growing so much. And we're not, with the exception of US congressional seats, we're not adding additional seats. So we have more people, so each district gets a little bit larger in terms of population size. So here's showing you population change in the state. I've superimposed Senate districts over the Texas Senate districts over this. And you can see the dark green counties are those that have grown numerically the most. So you kind of look at Dallas, Fort Worth, and Plano areas, Collin, Dallas, and Tarrant County. And then Harris County and Bexar County, very large, dense populations continuing to grow. And then you have lower Rio Grande Valley with growth. But then when you look out west, Midland, Odessa area, because of the Permian Basin, Lubbock, Amarillo, and El Paso have grown pretty dramatically as well. So these are going to be areas that the senators and representatives are going to be looking at, how we're going to probably, because the populations become more dense there, we're going to have to make smaller and smaller districts. And then you also see counties that have lost population. So all those that are kind of bluish or purplish, I'm not sure what that color is, they've lost population. So the net result of that is they'll have to try to draw the districts a little bit larger to bring population into those. And that tends to be a controversial thing, especially with rural Texans, simply because to do that very frequently, they'll have to bring in urbanized areas. And so certainly listening to a lot of the redistricting hearings, rural Texans are like, well, we want our representatives and our senators to represent rural issues. And if you put too much of an urban area in there, then their focus might be too focused on the urban challenges rather than what's happening in rural Texas. So this is just zoomed in, so you can kind of see, this was zoomed in on the San Antonio area. So you can kind of see, the really dense area. I don't know what's going to happen in Bexar County and kind of the I-35 corridor between Austin and San Antonio. But my guess is there may have to be some smaller districts in that area. Same thing in Houston and Dallas, Fort Worth. And then here's percent change, and percent change is the speed of population change. And here you can see the rapid growth is in suburban ring counties. So if you look at Denton, Collin counties up there, Montgomery, Fort Bend, Williamson, Comel, Hayes, Kendall County. And then you also have Loving County over here, which had 83 people in it in 2010, and they added 87 people, and they grew at a rate of 107% over the decade. But that probably isn't going to result in there being a splitting of districts in that area. If you look at Denton, Collin County, those areas have gotten tremendously more populated over the decade. Same thing with Montgomery and Fort Bend, Williamson County, and so on. And then here again, zoomed in on the Dallas area. So I just wanted to kind of highlight here, this is because we don't have the redistricting data yet, but just an indicator of what what's likely to be happening, occurring, is the Census Bureau has census tracts, and they split those because population, or each decade, because if the population has grown, or they may even combine them if the population has gotten more sparse. So they'll make larger, same thing as what we're talking about with redistricting. Thing is, though, they can add additional census tracts, whereas the House and Senate can't add additional seats. So, but the idea is, if you see a blue line here, that's an area where over the decade has grown at a small level of geography pretty fast. And those are going to likely be areas. And so let me zoom in here on the San Antonio area. See all of these tracts kind of around in the suburban areas in between Austin and San Antonio, where essentially the population has become much more dense. And so again, that's going to result in this challenge that the representatives and senators have in drawing their districts. When we look at population change by race and ethnicity over the decade, you can see the Latino population has grown pretty dramatically and quickly. The non-Hispanic white population has grown, but not quite as fast. Where our forecast is that the Latino population will exceed the non-Hispanic white population at the end of this year or early 2022. The other group that's growing fast, and you can't necessarily see it here, but the Asian population is growing very quickly in terms of percent change. And so that's been a factor. When we look at change over the decade, you can see that the Latino population, we can attribute about almost 52% of the population change in the state to growth of the Latino population. And the Asian population is only 5% of the total population, but we can attribute almost 13% of the population change in Texas to growth of the Asian population. And then, of course, the African-American population is growing a little bit faster than they are as a percentage of the total. And the non-Hispanic white is growing slower than they are as a percentage of the total. I just zoomed in here in the San Antonio area just to kind of highlight. So one of the other challenges that comes up is the Voting Rights Act. And there are sometimes the need to draw a voting rights district. Here's showing you the percent of the population that's Latino in San Antonio. See big concentrations in the west side of San Antonio and south side of San Antonio. Then here similarly is one for the African-American population. You could do this with any urbanized area and you'll see these concentrations. And that's where, again, our representative and senators will have to give consideration as to whether or not they'll need to potentially draw a voting rights district there. But this also highlights, when you get the redistricting file, there's a lot of, as I mentioned, demographic detail. So race and ethnicity are part of that file. And that's down at the block level of data. And so you're really able to kind of zoom in and kind of see, on a block by block basis, what the characteristics of the population are. And that becomes useful in both in drawing voting rights districts, but also in drawing districts of communities of interest. So trying to put people together that seem to be voting together and have similar interests. I'm just going to pretty much now just go through and talk about a few references and move through this pretty quickly. This is our website. We have a page that's devoted to redistricting, really just focused on Senate districts, because the House districts are really small and very irregular geographies. But if you look here, you'll see, if you go to our website and look at data, Census 2020, you'll see then redistricting resources. We have a map for each one of them with information about population change, data tables, and then a little narrative. Here's a narrative for, this is Senate District 26, because I've been showing you pictures of Bexar County. I'm housed in San Antonio at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Then we have an office in this Stephen F. Austin building in Austin. And so here's a narrative. Here's a copy of the map. You can kind of see the map there, and then information about the racial and ethnic composition and change over the decade within the counties that district is in. And then the Census Bureau has a redistricting website or a page. I would encourage, if you're interested in redistricting, there's some pretty good stuff there. Just would encourage you to kind of go and explore that and see what they have. The Census Bureau does do quality assessment. So even though we had a number of anomalies, they take quality very, very, very seriously. And that's part of the reason we're having these delays in delivery of the data, because they're really going through and trying to ensure they have the data as accurate as possible. And so anyway, they will be going through this process of assessing the operations of the census as well as the accuracy of the data. So they'll go through that process. There's something called the count resolution operation that essentially is if a state or a local official, the highest elected official, so a city, a mayor, or a county judge or the governor, can essentially call a question about the accuracy of the data, provide evidence indicating that the count was either too high or too low, and then the Census Bureau will review that, and they do make changes. It won't necessarily be represented in the initial redistricting file, but for all the other purposes of the census, the corrections will essentially be made in the subsequent data releases that they produce. I think that was all I wanted to talk about. Here's our website, my contact information, and I don't know if we have any time, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have if there are any, if we have time.
Oh, yes, we do have time. Wow, that was awesome. Thank you, Loyd. Really appreciate that. Very detailed, and it helps, gives us a better understanding what we're looking at and what we might expect. I mean, nothing's certain, right, until we get the numbers, but what an incredible presentation. And I asked Shirley if it was possible if we could get it put onto our website, the PDF one, if you're willing, if you're
able. Yeah, sure. It's public domain. If it isn't already, it will be up on our website as well. So all of our presentations we put up, and you're welcome to use whatever you want there. It's kind of like, and you can go to our website and pull other stuff. All of the redistricting hearings that we testify at, those presentations are there. And so anything that you find useful for communicating information about demographics, it's yours to use.
Awesome. Well, that will be, we will definitely post it on TonyAnnDeShield.com's website. Thank you. So Karen, do we have some questions? Karen Marshall is our question gal, Loyd, and she, and do we have anything specifically to him before? I know we've got a number to our elected officials, our incredible elected officials. So do you have some for our presenter?
Yes, there were a couple. The first one is, what is a census tract?
That's a good question. Census tract is really a statistical boundary, and they range in size. The ideal size is 4,000 people. If they get over 8,000 people, then the Census Bureau wants to split it into 2 census tracts. If it gets below, I think it's 2,500 people, then they want to combine it with another census tract. So it's really just kind of going across the country and kind of, taking these little geographic, I don't know if we call them snapshots, but kind of geographic areas that meet those criteria. They try to align them with, they do align them with like county boundaries, so they won't cross county boundaries. They try to align them with other civil boundaries, like city boundaries. And then they also try to align them as much as possible, like with highways and streets and things like that, so that you kind of have, a statistical area that has some kind of meaning that you can, there are geographic references that you can look at. But it's generally one of the smaller areas of geography that you get pretty reliable statistical data for from some of the products that the Census Bureau releases. If you get down to smaller areas, the quality, I won't say the quality, the accuracy of the data because the population's smaller, so the accuracy becomes less and less.
All right. And thank you. And then Mary Heffernan asks, how might the 3 new House seats be fit into the Texas map?
Well, I probably would defer that to the representatives and senators, because that's a challenge. Again, it's going to be, basically it's, if you put one somewhere, then other districts have to move and shift. And so it's really probably looking at the places where we've seen the most rapid population growth. And I kind of highlighted those, especially with the percent change, excluding Loving County. But those that have numerically high change and rapid change, those are probably the areas that they'll need to look at in terms of putting a district in. But there's already a district there, so there'll have to be some shifting of districts. So I was trying to say a shell game, but it's not a shell game. It's more just like, one of these games where you're pushing things one way or another way until you get it all to fit together. So it's, and there is software that the senators, representatives, and their staff have access to. There's something that the Texas Legislative Council has that they make available called Red Apple. And essentially it does a lot of, if you put criteria in, it will essentially, there are programs that will, draw options, and then you can kind of move those around and change them. So there is, fortunately, with a lot of the geographic information data software that's available, there's a lot of things that you can somewhat automate, but then after it's been automated, then everybody has to kind of go in and kind of tweak it, because the programs aren't going to get it just the way that the representatives and senators feel like it needs to be.
All right. And Leslie Fitzpatrick asks, when do you think the data will be available for the Texas legislature to begin working with later this year?
It should be, well, they've committed to the end of September. I've seen, I think, and I don't know where it is in terms of the US House and Senate, but they're trying to pass legislation to require them to deliver it by then. There's some lawsuits currently because the data have been delayed, and it's creating some havoc with elections that are going to be happening. I mean, there isn't, for November elections, there's be a real challenge to get the data at the end of September, draw districts, and get them, through the House and Senate and the governor. And so anyway, I think there's some legal wrangling around, trying to manage this. I try to stay out of that as much as possible. I monitor it, but I certainly don't get too involved in that.
All right. And the last question is, once the data is delivered, how long does it normally take before it's actually ready for use so that it could be used, for example, for primaries, so that primaries can be held?
Yeah, so the data should be, so the Census Bureau has released a data set that is in the exact format that the redistricting file will be released. It's not the redistricting data, but essentially it allows states to put those data into their software and play around with redistricting. And so once the data are released, assuming maybe it'll be released before September 30th, but if it's released on September 30th, you can put the data right in. And if you've done some work in advance with data that you may already have, you could pretty quickly, with that, probably overnight, draw at least an initial pass at districts with some of the software that we have. And if you, put into that certain rules that you're looking for. And then, like I said, it's the methods are also pretty sophisticated in terms of shifting the boundaries. So you might have a software, run a software program that gives you initial set of districts, and then you start moving those boundaries around. And if you move one and push some people out of a district and add additional people, then it will shift all of the other districts. And so it's, with the software that we have, you should pretty quickly be able to turn around, a proposed map of districts. But then you have the political process that has to happen where, certainly all of the senators and representatives within a party probably need to have agreement. And then there's all the political wrangling across parties that will happen as well. And the committees, are clearly bipartisan. I mean, you kind of have, even though, there's strong voices on both sides. And so there is definitely likely to be some political wrangling that happens before there's some agreement about this is the map we're going to put forward for a vote. But hopefully, again, that should happen pretty quickly. And then, so that will happen, but the House and Senate have to be in session to vote on those maps. And so the governor, and I've not actually heard exactly what the plans are for this, but the governor would have to call a special session, and then the House and Senate would need to vote on the maps. They can start working on the maps without being in session, but to actually vote on them, they'll have to be in session, and then the governor ultimately would have to sign off on whatever maps that they produce.
All right, and it looks like that was all the questions for you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Well, you were, again, I can't thank you enough. Such valuable information, and it gives us such a better understanding of how the whole thing works. So thank you for we'd like you to stay on. We just got a couple questions we're going to ask our elected officials, but thank you for taking your time this early morning on Friday. I do think you might have another meeting to go to, so if you have to hop off, just know how much we really do appreciate you being with us this morning.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for everything you do.
Thank you, Loyd. Thank you so much. Okay, it's we're coming on to 8 o'clock here, but I thought one of the things that I was going to ask Karen to ask maybe a question that would go one to our senator, one to JC, our representative, and then maybe we could carry some of these questions over to next week if we don't get to them today. So Karen, can you accomplish that for us, please?
I will do my darndest. I believe that this question might be for Senator Hughes. And the question is, will the election marshals have the authority to override a rogue county clerk who potentially is breaking the election law?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. And yes, the way the law is intended, there'll be DPS troopers and they'll know the law. And so normally when it gets to the level of a county clerk, we've got bigger people involved, more eyes are paying attention to it. The idea really is at the polling place when quick decisions have to be made, when a poll watcher is not being allowed in, when a voter is not being allowed to vote. That's really where these folks are most important. By the time we get to the clerk level, we normally have courts involved and we have more eyes looking at it. But that's the idea. And let me just say, we are so thankful for Professor Potter. The guy has such information, presents it well, always kind, and always answers my dumb questions. He's a blessing. And I'll mention one thing about redistricting. Because that data is coming so late, we're preparing to possibly move our primary. It's not a done deal yet, but if we don't get to approve those maps till October, and then we have to figure it out and go through the courts, normally in the month of December, you'd be filing your paperwork for the March primary in the next year. And so we are getting ready in case we have to push that back and move our primary back. We hopefully won't have to, but we're getting ready for that just in case.
Thank you. Senator, you're just awesome. Thank you so much. I see a lot of chat in there giving you many kudos. So rightfully so. Okay, so Karen, go ahead.
All right, Representative Chaton, Virginia Webb asks, could one of the current bills be amended to include protection against voter machine fraud, or is that already in one of the current bills?
Yeah, I think go ahead. I think we have a few bills addressing machines. We heard another one on Wednesday. Representative Swanson put that together and we passed that out of committee. We know there's concerns and issues with the machines, and we're going to we have different bills working on that.
So do you have one more question for for Senator and Jason and our representative?
Certainly.
I think you have a whole lot, but go ahead.
Okay, so I'm taking them in the order. Let's see. Has overnight voting been addressed by any of the bills? Like
Yes.
voting in the middle of the night?
Yes. So this is Brian Hughes, and Representative Giton, I wasn't interrupting you. I was just saying amen to what you were saying. We do have in those House and Senate bills to deal with those machines to make sure they're being checked for accuracy, make sure the data is being run, and we have cybersecurity experts looking at all that to make sure. On 24-hour voting, that's not allowed in Texas. It's never been done. We had one county in one election do that, and happened to be in Harris County. And we know it was hard to get election workers there, really hard to get poll watchers there. Elections, things that are important aren't to be done in the dead of night. We want to have plenty of time for folks to vote. And so Senate Bill 7 does extend early voting hours in many counties that just had limited hours before. But voting will be for a 12-hour period between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. in that second week to make sure people have plenty of time. But 24-hour voting has never been contemplated in Texas. That never should have happened. The Harris County had no authority to do that. Harris County doesn't make the laws for the state. The legislature is elected by the people, and you send us here to make these decisions. That's what we do. So 24-hour voting will be addressed. Yes.
All right. Leonard Foster asks, how can we get more publicity on the number of fraud cases backlogged in the courts, as have been cited by Governor Abbott?
So that's one of the things that's come up in these interviews. It used to be the Democrats would say, well, there's no evidence of voter fraud. And now they've started saying, well, there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud. And so my question to my Democrat friends and to CNN has been, how much fraud is okay? How much is enough? No voter fraud is okay. The Attorney General is investigating over 500 counts of voter fraud right now because the courts were closed last year, and many of them still are because of COVID-19. We haven't been able to move these cases through. But you should know that in Texas, elections have been overturned because of voter fraud. I'm talking about in the last few years. Over in Gregg County, in East Texas, we have a county commissioner under indictment. And many of these cases are brought by Democrats against Democrats. This is not a partisan issue. So these people that say there's no widespread voter fraud, ask them how much fraud is enough, how much is okay, and they don't have an answer for you because the Democrats don't want to admit this is happening in Texas. It needs to be dealt with.
All right. The next question is also in regards to the Marshal program you spoke about. Could the election marshal training be made available through the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement so that any peace officer could thereby take it and thereby expand the availability of the training?
That is a great idea. The bill, as we filed, Senator Betancourt filed, deals with DPS troopers because they have statewide jurisdiction and they're everywhere around the state. But that's a great idea as far as I'm concerned. The Texas Commission on Law Enforcement trains and certifies Texas peace officers. I'm all for that. I'll talk to Senator Betancourt today and find out if we can do that. That sounds like a great idea to me.
Okay, I think that we are going to wrap up the questions. I know there are many other ones, so maybe you could help us out and take some of these questions that weren't asked today, and let's see if we can carry them over to next week and give them high priority at that. Oh, wait, go ahead, Representative Johnson.
Thank you. I just want to throw in one more thing when it comes to redistricting. I'm happy that you guys brought Professor Potter on, and I'm also on redistricting committee, and so I've heard the presentation, and he does a good job of laying it out multiple times. But I will say this: we do need everyone's participation in that as well. We had a hearing on, gosh, I guess it was on Wednesday, dealing with the creation of a commission to take over what the legislature's been tasked with doing, and it was lopsided. It was few, and so there doesn't seem to be a big push across the state for it, but we will want everybody's involvement in that as well with these hearings, and just participating with redistricting is an important important
right.
process, and we want to have you all
That's right.
involved in that as well.
That's right. Amen.
Yeah, I agree. And we need, we're going to have to start focusing on that. That's why I thought that we would bring the professor on, and then we would also bring on some other guests talking about redistricting. It's just so important. And so there is a website that you can go to, TLO's website, and then like in the middle of the page, you can go to redistricting. If I'm not mistaken, that map might be on there. So we will start pushing that out, and maybe Representative JC, you could ask, you could give us a briefing on that every week, as you can too, Senator. And so that we
Yes.
are being aware of what's going on and want to take it to the next level and ask for input. So thank you for
Yes.
that.
And the last thing was Representative Jatan and Senator Hughes, if you guys would mind providing the bill numbers of these election integrity bills, perhaps we could post them on Tony Ann's website, because everybody's wanting to look at the bills.
Yes. I'll email those over. Happy to.
Wonderful. That'd be awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, so we are past our time. It's been an hour, but it was worth it every single second that we've had today on every call, but really good information today. Your challenge this week is this is early voting. You have to get 5 people to the polls to make sure, because the people forget about the school board, the city councils. This is important, and make sure you know who you're going to vote for, and share that information with other people. I want 5 extra people, each one of you, to take to the polls. And then you also have CD6 going on up there in the Tarrant County area, all through there. It's not just Tarrant County. So that's your challenge this week. Next week, we're going to be looking at getting someone from the RNC to come on and talk about election integrity. And I might have somebody else, but I can't disclose that yet. I'm waiting for confirmation. That leads me to say, look out for the emails that tell you who we're going to be featuring next week. Thank you all for coming on today. Incredible, all of it was absolutely fabulous. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I look forward to seeing you next Friday. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. This way, when I stay on, I get to see a number of names that I didn't see. So pretty exciting.
Mine doesn't want to turn off.
Oh, you want me to mute you?
Yeah, no, I want to leave, but it won't let me leave. It's frozen.
Well, I will just go ahead and end it all for everybody. So, I got to do chat first before I do that. I've got to save it. Save chat. Okay, great. Got it. Now I can end it. Goodbye, everybody.